Hello, everyone. Welcome to another conversation with friends. I am delighted to have my amazing colleague slash mentor, Dr. Mary Claire Heffron, with me today, who is one of the many voices in infant mental health that always comes to mind when we say reflective supervision. She's an outstanding professional, a psychologist, as you can see here, an author, a speaker, and anytime any of you have been in the presence of Dr. Mary Claire Heffron, you can sense her caring, gentle, nurturing spirit. That is what I most want to say about her. And I invite you again, as I always do, to read through this at your leisure. I don't want to spend our time telling you how wonderful she is. I do want to alert you to some resources that are available to you to help you in your personal growth around reflective supervision. And both of these items are available on Amazon. And from here, I'm going to move immediately to our conversation. And thank you so much, Mary Claire, for taking time to be with me and to share a little bit of information with those folks who choose to tune in.
Thank you, Barbara, and thank you for your really kind introduction. And I think it's been a mutual learning adventure with you over the years. So it's really fun to have this opportunity to talk a little bit about the work that we both care about so much.
Yeah. So I don't want to miss a chance to again plug your amazing book that
Thank you.
I had the gift of being invited to write cover notes on. So I read it before publication. That was kind of fun. And I think it's a great tool for those of you who are wanting to refresh your skills as a supervisor. That's for emerging reflective practice supervisors, and I often recommend it. But to start us off, because I have a variety of people watching, why don't we start with what's the definition you like to use to talk about this concept of reflective practice supervision for folks who might not be familiar with that work?
Okay. Well, it's a great question. A long time ago, when I was learning how to be a clinician, learning how to work with families and young children, my mentor, Julie Paul, used to say to me that this work that we're doing is too important and it's too complex to do alone. And so for me, that's always been a real sort of a statement that's guided me, is that those clinicians, those individuals, those home visitors, those teachers, those people who are plunging into the world of early development, working with families, working with all of the joys and pleasures of that, and the stresses and strains and the issues of inequality and all of the stress of modern life, including, of course, our current situation, really deserve to have opportunities to think about this, to kind of have a chance to refuel for the important work that they're doing, and to feel that somebody is there to see them and to value this work, which oftentimes is work that the public doesn't see. I mean, if you're an architect, somebody could admire the building. I'm currently working on a garden, and somebody can come out and say, wow, look at those tomatoes. But if you're doing the work of really working with families and young children about this process of being, your work often goes unseen. Nobody knows exactly what you're doing, how you're thinking about it, the places where you're puzzled, the places where it's really painful to do this work, as well as sometimes very joyful. And so reflective supervision, whether it's with an individual supervisor or in a group, is that chance to come together, to share your work, to get support, to grapple about, oh my gosh, how can I proceed with this? What's the best way to do this? How do I bear sometimes the sadness that I'm witnessing? What do I do?
Sorry to interrupt you. I do want to underscore, there's so many things you said that were really, really powerful. And this notion of not doing this alone, right? And I think not only as mental health providers or regardless of the transdisciplinary field, we work with nurses and early care and education specialists and speech and language pathologists, on and on. I'm not going to list everyone. You know who you are in infant mental health. We don't see us doing this. And sometimes we don't even see the fruit of our labor so often.
Right.
And so this idea of being seen and held in the work, I think is really a powerful piece of what we call reflective practice supervision or reflective supervision. And yet I don't know that we name it as clearly as you just did. What we're doing, one, is so important and vital to human development, not just the development of the child, but the development of the caregiver. There's this mutual
Mhm.
developmental process that's happening, and we're developing as providers as we do it. And again, who sees us? Who's our sounding board? Who holds us through that? Because we know I've talked a lot in these meetings about that affective mirror, that mirror that sees you and says you are good enough in this work.
Mhm.
So the powerful importance of that, and I think about our kids, people are quick to see them when they're misbehaving.
Right.
The children that come to us because of the challenges they have. Everybody sees that.
Right.
But do we see and relish the successes and the joys? So I just want to underscore those moments because I think they really are powerful. Yeah.
Right. I think it's so important. And also we are coming into this work with our own histories, our own
Yeah.
struggles, our
Yeah.
own vulnerabilities. And sometimes it's so helpful to have the perspective of somebody else, not necessarily somebody saying, well, you blew it, but somebody saying, well, wait a minute, let's take a look at this a little bit more closely. Or how might
Mhm.
this be affecting you, that's making you see it in this, in this way. And it's so helpful. We're really talking about the art of becoming, of helping others become. And we are also always in this process of becoming, of learning more, of realizing who we are, of stumbling, of picking ourselves up. And so it is not something that we want to do unaccompanied. We want to be accompanied. We long for this. We long to be seen, but also we know that this accompaniment, this being with, is a very, very powerful and nurturing process. I hate to, I don't hate to, but I often compare this in a way um, to, to parenting. You certainly don't have control
Mhm.
over what your children become. Um, there's genetics, there's opportunity, and et cetera, but you have a huge influence, and the way that you accompany them, the way that provide certain information, ask certain questions, provide
Mhm.
certain kinds of structures, is immensely helpful. And
Yeah.
this is what we're doing in supervision. Certainly not parenting in that same sense, but we're providing this kind of atmosphere, this sort of structure, this sort of benevolent holding and vision and belief that somebody has the capacity to do the work, the capacity to
Yeah.
be with others and to help them grow and develop.
Yeah, I'm not sure that many of us would see benevolent and supervision together. But I but
Right.
but no, but I like how you frame that, because some of us in the back of our mind or our past experiences think of supervision as judgment or people telling us what we did wrong, as you said. And a
Mhm.
reflective model by design is nurturing, strength-based, benevolent, learning from what didn't work, imagining, assuming the best in the other. Are those fair restatements, do you think?
I think those are fair restatements. And also, this sort of benevolent approach doesn't mean that a supervisor is sometimes called on to amplify something or to bring in new information
Mhm.
because somebody might not know, or because of their own experiences, um, maybe missing it.
Mhm.
And I think of my own, I'll share a personal experience. So of my own work as a supervisor when I had a teenage daughter who I was, sort of concerned about, as one would be. And at that point, I was working with a number of teenage mothers who had really had gone off the rails and had dropped out of school and were in all sorts of, hard
Right.
situations. So I realized at one point that my own concern about my daughter was getting mixed up with my work with these
Yeah.
lovely young
Yeah.
teenage
Yeah.
women who were in different
Mhm.
circumstances. So I
Mhm.
needed some help for somebody to help me kind of sort that out, what was different, why this might happen, and how I could navigate that particular situation. And this happens in different ways, and I think all the time in
Yeah.
supervision.
Oh, yeah. I mean, of course, we bring ourselves to the work.
Right.
So part of what happens in this, and I like to use about dynamic because it's ever changing, this ever changing reflective supervision relationship, like every relationship is dynamic, it's moving, are opportunities for your own insight from, again, that reflective lens, that other, around what the things you aren't seeing. Um, and also, I do want to speak to, because I know you and I have had this discussion about where administrative tasks intervene. And there's some discussion in the field and difference of opinion. I don't want to start
Mm-hmm.
a significant challenge to anybody. But I do think there are moments as a supervisor, I bring this into my reflective work, where we still have accountability. And I think that's true
Absolutely.
of people. I think in
Mm-hmm.
nurturing as a parent, there's accountability for my child. And I often refer to reflective supervision as a nurturing activity. Again, it's not parenting, but it's nurturing. You're
Mm-hmm.
creating, you're nurturing, you're supporting a professional in their development. So there's this tension point sometimes when I help new supervisors around, well, I feel bad giving direction or criticism. Well, would you never tell someone not to continue doing something that wasn't helpful to them?
Mm-hmm. Right. So this, Barbara, you're putting your finger on, I think, one of the really important discussions in the whole field of reflective supervision, which is this notion of reflective supervision, where we tend to really kind of raise the issue of the mentoring, the nurturing, which is so central. And we don't always know as easily how to do what I call the monitoring, or the holding the ethical
Okay.
issues, or the sometimes the programmatic needs. I mean, as much as you might want to do something, we all live in a real world of documentation and meeting certain standards. So this balance between mentoring and monitoring is really important. And the sort of I wouldn't call it, I think I'll call it the secret sauce. The notion is that when you do reflective supervision, that both of these ways of being, the mentoring and the monitoring, must and can be approached with a reflective lens. So in other words, I think the tendency is it feels nice to be a mentor, to be supportive, to be nurturing, to help people grow. And sometimes it feels, when you're the monitor, where you're maybe helping somebody see that, that mileage report or that
Yes.
treatment plan is really necessary, and they didn't do it, that you tend to wait, or maybe do it in a more directive way. So our task as supervisors is, how do we use the same reflective techniques, the same reflective strategies, when we're discussing the sort of the monitoring, the ethical issues, the compliance, the programmatic things that are so much a part of this work. So we don't want to divide those two as to, I'm really nice when I'm doing this, and then I put on some sort of wicked witch hat when I have to do mentoring or talk with somebody about a struggle they're having, or a limitation that they're facing,
Right.
for one reason or another. So we're looking in a way for coherence. So it's just the same way as when you would discipline a child. If you can do that discipline, or that explanation, or setting the limit in a way that creates safety, that creates coherence, and helps that person understand the reason for it, and also provides a listening ear for why it may have been difficult, to get that algebra homework done, or to clean up the mess when when you spilled the paints all over. So this is our task, and it's not an easy one, but it's the sort of most reflective supervisors, most supervisors in general, live in a world where you have these two kinds of they're parts, both equally important
Yeah.
parts of the work that we do. And
And
it's
I,
the how
Yeah.
to that system.
Yeah. Well, I love that. Again, you have this brilliant way of making the complex relatable and also nurturing this sensitive quality of monitoring. Yes, we're not
Mhm.
scolding. We're monitoring. We're ensuring that what you are doing is in line with the mandates of our program because we are involved in a programmatic structure that has requirements that many of us don't create the expectations, but we're accountable to. So the holding of the two, the mentoring and the monitoring, and I also like your pulling together this coherence in that. And what I take away from that, and you can tell me if this is what you intended, is
Mhm.
um, helping the supervisee really internalize the required
Mhm.
activities that you're monitoring. That's a part of your professional expectation. I should not have to stand over you to make sure these things happen.
Right.
As a professional, you should create a strategy that makes sure these
Exactly.
things happen. And that's my intention is to get you to that place. Yeah,
Right.
that sounds
That's really, really an important point, Barbara. So what we're doing in reflective supervision in general is that is so, I think, so interesting and so great when it works, is we're creating a sort of an atmosphere of collaboration,
right.
because your way of doing something might be different than my way. You bring a different perspective, different skills, but you might get at it. You know, we'll get at it, we'll get at it. But this notion of working together collaboratively, this is the task, or this is what's in front of us. And in the old-fashioned way of supervision, or so more, this is certainly models that I was trained in originally, the supervisor was this kind of um, all wise, mystical being that you would listen to, and then you would try to do what they said, and then you were thinking, what the heck? I don't know if I can do it this way. So, what we're trying to do is create this idea of collaboration so that the supervisee, or the person who's doing the work, who's out there, actually builds their confidence and their ability to think. Because in the work that we're doing to create change in whatever discipline you're working in, whatever sort of setting, we're called upon to work with others to help them find their best selves, good ways of doing things, and ways of serving children. And all this requires reflection, adaptation, consideration of the people that you're working with, this kind of collaborative approach to help the other develop along the way. So we can't go with the old model of the supervisor as the kind of the brilliant being who's telling you every step of the way what to do, and you merely take it in, take notes variously, and then go out and scratch your head. We're really trying to build that confidence in thinking and feeling ability, the thinking and
Right.
feeling together, which is so critical.
I think this is a great place to kind of think about parallel process because as you talk about the all-knowing supervisor, and I kind of was raised up in that model as a psychologist. Oh, if I could just be as fabulous as all my mentors, then I've really got it. And we really have, I think, in a reflective lens, you talked about your best self, supporting the other to be the best they can be, not to be like me. So really facilitating that the internal growth in the supervisee, and I think that's a great segue to parallel process, because when we're working with families, I think our hope is very similar. That
Right.
we're not there to create little mini us's. We're there to facilitate what's organic and works for them. And I would love for you to kind of think a little bit about that as well. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. The whole the model of reflective supervision is really based on this idea that you're talking about, is how do we help a provider, whether this would be a public health nurse, a social worker, all of the kind of wonderful people that we have doing work in early childhood. How do we help them move into a space with another person, create some sense of safety, whether that's directly with a child or with a parent and child together, with a whole family often? How do we help them create this safety, and then help them figure out what's to be done? what is it, what is it that they're trying to learn? What is it that they're grappling with? Is it getting a really fussy baby to go to sleep? Is it helping an autistic child be mainstreamed into a regular classroom? What is it that needs to be done? How do they think about it? How do they sharpen their observation skills of what this child's experience is, what their experience is of the child or situation, and really think together? Because I think more than anything, as I've worked with early childhood providers of all kinds, and I've been very lucky to be able to work with nurses, with doctors, with psychologists, with social workers, is what they're really called upon is to be in a situation and truly attune to what the other person is experiencing, create enough safety so that they can open a dialogue, and then help that person, or those people, or that child figure out something that works for them, that fits the structure of their culture, of the situation, of the classroom, of the parameters of the task that they're doing, maybe in a clinic or in a public health setting. So how to figure that out in a way that's respectful, that's bringing out the best in the other person, and that's allowing this other person to feel good about themselves and to have this sense of I love the word efficacy, of feeling that you're powerful, that you can do it. And I know that in research with parents and with families, this idea of efficacy, of feeling that you know how to solve a problem with your child, is much more important than the particular problem that you've solved. Right. So this sense of confidence. And I love that, because I love this in the whole field of infant and early childhood mental health, because if we start with a child and working with families very young, and parents begin to develop this sense, this sort of the kinds of problems and issues that unfold over time are different, but the set of skills that you need to work with that, they're in some ways very much the same. You have to learn to listen, you have to be attuned, you have to get the perspective of the other person, and of what that other child, to be able to imagine sometimes what a child is or a parent is experiencing. Have to hear, but ultimately what we're doing is helping that parent and child together, that family, develop ways of being that fit and make sense for them in terms of their desires, their forward development, and how they're going to function in the world in a way that makes them feel good and comfortable, and that fits what they want to do.
Well, as you're talking, I'm thinking, I hope everyone who's watching this is taking notes. And if you're not, watch it again and take notes, because that's what I'm going to do. Because Mary Claire is just dropping bombs. She's like dropping all these intellectual concepts, and I'm like, my brain's going, that's right, that's right, that's right. And that's, and I think sometimes for myself in the doing of this work, it's so, I think about the connection to the other person. There's such this sense of connecting, and I think attunement you mentioned, and mirroring. It really is my gift, I think, to support their journey. So there's this need to really be in the journey with, but to also let go of the journey. This is your walk, as supported by all the elements you talked about, the family's culture and their values for their child, and the belief systems they want to teach, and the skill sets that are successful for them, not the skill sets that I want for them, but the skill sets that they find successful, so that that sense of self-efficacy and self-determination really grows, and I simply get to facilitate the growth of that. So there's this tension of wanting to some degree be a part of the work, but we don't get to own the work. And sometimes that might be challenging for some of us to sort of let go a little bit with all of our professional training and all of our knowledge. There's some letting go and giving authority to the family. And that's in the parallel process when working with families and also with the supervisee. So yeah, those are the things that bubbled up for me while you were talking.
Well, I think that's a really good illustration of kind of the parallel process, because as a provider working with a family or teacher working with a child, there's also going to be things where you might want to pause and invite people to think a little bit more. Like, so I'm thinking of families that I've worked with that had tremendous intellectual goals for their children, but the children weren't always, the children had some interests of their own, playing soccer, other things, and so rather, so the I think as professionals, we can't say, wait a minute, your kid's going to miss out. He's going to, be miserable if he doesn't get this opportunity to do this. But again, how do we slow down the process and ask the questions and wonder what the parent may have observed or what they've heard, and is there any way to think about a both and to this, or to sort of open it up a little bit. So again, that's the sort of what I like to think of as the monitoring. We don't forget about what we know about early development or values that for kids that we know work, but we also can't impose them wholesale on someone. We really have to, again, create the space, wonder, sometimes ask if people want more information. But you're absolutely right. We have to respect often the kinds of things that people want their children to know, and that will make them feel that they're creating a family that has meaning for them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that pause, when you speak of that, reminds me again of creating space to honor the family's journey. I think when we pause to kind of think about why is that so important to the family may have a really deep story about what their access was like for educational opportunities, or the hopes and visions they have for the future of their child. There can be a lot of things behind that drive that we are not taking time, pausing to fully understand before we invite a new idea, and sometimes our idea, about what we think is best for children. So taking this time to really pause. I do want to, because I knew we could just run. We wouldn't need a lot of structure in terms of what we were going to talk about. But I do want to sort of invite the transdisciplinary approach, because clinical mental health folks do clinical supervision, and yet reflective supervision is a supervision strategy that's used across disciplines. And sometimes people get confused about that. And I think if you've been listening, all the strategies that Mary Claire is talking about are certainly in line with the variety of people that are necessary in infant mental health. And I love you're starting with Cherie Paul's comment, this work is too important, to do alone. And I think that also speaks to our transdisciplinary infant mental health community. No one discipline can do this. We all have to work together. So as we think about, because I get a lot of requests too for, we want to train public health nurses or early care and education. And I want to hear from you, because I know what I think, but you're my guest today, around taking these models to non-clinical populations. Yeah.
Oh my gosh. Well, I first of all, I'm so pleased that you're doing this and you're getting these invitations. And I think that we're learning more and more about how effective it can be if people who are doing a different kind of work, let's say in public health, or let's say in early intervention, where they have important knowledge, important skills to bring to a family, say related to health or related to educational issues related to disability, that has taken them years to get, right? These are often highly skilled individuals, home visitors who often come from different backgrounds, lots and lots of skills and knowledge. And the analogy that I used to use is one of a piece of plexiglass. And we all know about plexiglass now, because if you've been in any bank or anything, there's the plexiglass shield.
Yes.
And so if you are a professional And there's on the other side of the shield, there's a family with a child that has a particular need for your services. And you have all of this stuff. You have knowledge, you have terrific skills, certification. And oftentimes, if you just bring that and you're trying to get to the family, it's like you come splat around up against the plexiglass shield. So in order to really engage with and understand a family story, what did it mean to this family to have a very premature baby and to worry about this child even staying alive for the first year of his life? We have to be able to hear those stories, to be able to tolerate that, to be able to figure out what this story means in terms of the work that you're called on to do. So this ability to engage with, to create this sort of sense of an invitation to be and to bring yourself to this work is really, really important. And I think that unless people in what I like to think of as all of our, our other professions who are doing this, the home visitors, the teachers, that they deserve to have this same set of skills in order to do their work. They will not be doing infant mental health treatment, but they will be engaging when they have these skills and this support. They're able to engage with families in a more meaningful way that allows the work to be done, I think, both at a pace and in a manner that is going to be more effective. There are emerging studies on this, and there's just, I have to be really, don't get me started on the research. It's too exciting, but many people who are in these allied fields, and I'm thinking of a wonderful group in Baltimore who's working in early intervention and finding how much more effective and engaged and participatory families are when their early intervention specialists, with are able to approach them in this manner.
Yeah.
So, and it's not fair to those specialists, to those home visitors, to ask them to do the work of working with young children and families, where we know relationships are central. It's not fair to have them do the work without the kind of support that allows them to build these skills, to get the support that they need, and the kind of the refueling, because again, they are also hearing and participating and being a part of these families that are holding often tremendous burdens.
Yes.
Historical trauma, real trauma, families who've immigrated here from war-torn countries, escaped tough situations, families who have lived in poverty for generations because of racism and inequality. So we have, we have to face the fact that we need to support the workers that we are sending in to work with families and young children, whatever the specific nature of their work is, whether it's, educating the children, doing parent education. And I'm very happy, so happy to hear how more and more relationship-based approaches are emerging in medical settings, both through public health nursing, but also in medical clinics. Thanks so much to the work of many people like Nadine Burke-Harris and others who are promoting the importance of trauma-informed and relationship-based work.
Well, and you're aware, again, we don't get lost in the research, but you're also aware of some of the work in reflective supervision being done in the child welfare community. So that's another system that certainly needs a lot of holding and helping. So I want to just underscore a couple things and then invite you to for final thoughts before we close. You started with Jerry Paul, who is one of, again, the icons / grandmothers of our field in many ways. This work is too important to do alone. And I sort of want to add something that you mentioned in terms of our transdisciplinary community. Everyone, what I took away from that is everyone holding vulnerable families deserves this reflective support. So I sort of take where we started with Jury and add to that everyone deserves.
Mm-hmm.
All of us, this huge transdisciplinary community, we all deserve this kind of relationship in service to ourselves and the families and quality work. So last thoughts? What would you like everybody to know or to take away? I mean, there's so much richness in what's been discussed.
Wow. Well, you know, I was thinking a little bit about the notion, and this was a question that we had discussed briefly, is the notion of what's the difference between mindfulness practice and reflective supervision. And I just wanted to end with that because I think it's such a it was a very important, really good question, and sometimes something that gets a little bit confused. And I wanted to clarify it. Is first of all, the work of reflective supervision is very, very much informed by a kind of self-awareness, awareness of yourself, and the ability to use strategies to remain calm in the moment, both as a supervisor and as a provider. Linda Gilkerson, who's done amazing work with a model called the FAN, has referred to this as mindful self-regulation. And so what we have to learn to do is when we're confronted with something that's shocking or horrifying, and we are being called upon, or just difficult, we are being called upon to sit still and listen to a story and try to understand so that we can, go forward in some useful way. But we have to remain calm because calm is very catchy. And when we're working with families with histories of trauma or current trauma, oftentimes it's very easy to get caught up in that and to become kind of one with that emotion. So we're needing these strategies that, again, that we use in the moment, this ability to ground ourselves, to take a deep breath, to quickly grab an image that's calming to us. We use these in our work as supervisors and in our work as clinicians. And this is part of what's, I think, passed on in reflective supervision. What's useful for providers, and again, this is the in the moment, but mindfulness in and of itself is an amazing practice that more and more people are using and learning about, mindful self-compassion and different forms of mindfulness practice, yoga and other things, whatever is useful to you. And this, I like to think of, is something that we learn and we practice on our own because it creates this greater self-awareness, this greater ability to stay to be able to use these strategies in the moment when we need them. But mindfulness is a kind of an activity that I think is focused on self-development and self-awareness. And when we're working with others in this wonderful practice that we have, which I like to think of as the practice of being, of becoming, of helping others become and develop and heal in whatever ways that is needed, we're really looking to using this ability to shift into a mindful self-awareness so that we can stay calm, we can slow down, and we can be with people in a way that helps them grow and change in the ways that they're calling out to us to help them do that.
Yeah. And part of our ability to do that is doing our work too.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And this is our work. Our work is
is
the mindfulness. For some people, that might be taking a run around the park. It might be planting a garden. It might be doing meditation. It might be doing yoga every day. It's often taking a step back from your busy world to be with yourself and to calm down.
Yeah.
And we do that again because it's good for ourselves, it's good for our own happiness, and it also makes us more able to do this wonderful work that we've been called to do often, to work with others in support of healthy development, healing, and growing.
Well, I'm grateful for you for taking the time. Well, I'm grateful for you for a lot of reasons, but today for taking the time
Likewise.
to chat
Um,
with me briefly about this piece of the work that's so very, very important and requires a great deal of um, compassion for ourselves. Like we have to be sensitive to ourselves and forgiving
mhm.
and do our own work, and then invites us to walk with someone else as they move through this
Mhm.
process. And there's so many folks that come to mind when you think of reflective practice supervision. And if I keep naming names, I'll forget someone. But I do want to, before we close, just dedicate this discussion to Rebecca Shimon Chinook, who is an
Oh,
icon in the reflective
yes,
field, who is a leader. Those of you with 0 to 3 know her well, and she has touched so many of our hearts in this work. And I think so many of us carry her with us in this work.
yes, yeah,
And so thank you,
right.
Rebecca, for your
Really,
legacy.
thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Oh my gosh. Yeah, what a loss. What a loss.
So
What a
we
loss.
we we keep the torch lit and we keep moving forward, Rebecca, for you. And I hope that we're doing you justice. Mary Claire, yes?
I firmly believe it. And Rebecca's vision so much, and work that myself and others are continuing, is this idea to make the preparation of reflective supervisors more robust, and particularly to reach the many, many supervisors and leaders who are doing this work but have not had the opportunity to have mentorship, to have training, to have time to really build that part of the reflective supervision competencies and capacities that we've been discussing. So Rebecca was on a mission. I think you're on a mission. I'm on a mission to make sure that this work gets done in a way that we know that children and families who are getting these services are getting the best possible support, and the leaders that are supporting them are well trained, capable, and grounded in these practices that allow others to flourish. So this is our work, and we can thank you for ending
Oh,
on that note.
yeah.
And I think I can say one last thing, and it was so brought to mind by talking about this difference between mentoring and monitoring, is that as supervisors, how important it is to really keep an eye on the mission of this work, which is such an important mission. And we have many opportunities, so many opportunities now in our work as we're expanding kinds of programs and the kind of knowledge and the kind of awareness about the importance of infancy, about the importance of the first years of life, and about the parents who are and the others who are accompanying these young children in this very formative time. So thank you, Barbara, for
Oh,
opening up all
yes,
the
of
space and
course.
these great questions and this wonderful discussion, and for being um, somebody who's carrying this torch on in a beautiful, unique way.
Yeah. Well, to everyone out there, my fan base and followers, I am, as you know, trying to change the world one relationship at a time. That's my mission. That's my passion. I invite you to follow me on YouTube, Facebook, and Instagram. And again, great thanks to Dr. Mary Claire Heffron.
Bye.